Hello, I'm Christopher Peel, pipe enthusiast. Recently, I was able to spend some time with Colin Rigsby, pipe maker, collector, and historian of things pipe. Let's go back to that day with Colin in his home and in his pipe room.
Chris, welcome to my home.
Well, thank you, Colin.
Thanks for taking the interest and the time to come over here and talk to me.
Thank you for having me. You've got a wonderful room here, full of history, and you yourself are a pipe maker. First off, how did you get into pipes? You know, some people would say pipes. That's my grandfather smoked a pipe. You know, what led you to that?
Well, my grandfather didn't smoke a pipe. In fact, he used to lecture me on smoking and drinking and all the things that one enjoys when they're younger. But I did grow up in a pipe smoking household, cigar smoking household also, and learned from a very early age that it's a great way to relax and enjoy tobacco without being addicted to it or wasting your time with bad tobacco. I learned early on that a good smoke requires a good vessel in which to smoke and a good blend to enjoy, and that it's something you do when you have time to relax, sit down and enjoy it, and not when you're frantically running around like we all do. And so I spent my youth in that household, and occasionally going to the local pipe and cigar shop there in the small town of Abilene, Texas. It was Bradley's at the time, and Bradley was an interesting guy. Had a very interesting and eclectic shop. This would have been in the late 70s into the 80s, and he had to close that shop in the early 90s, if I'm correct there. But so over the years, spent a lot of time going in and out of there and seeing all the pipes and smelling the cigars and things when I go in there. And as a kid, enjoyed that part of it, but never really thought much about smoking a pipe. So it wasn't until way after my college days and my band days of my musical career as it was, and then into my 30s when I settled down and started thinking about family and things like that, and was looking for something to enjoy. And I kind of stumbled on a pipe shop one day, actually went vacationing in San Antonio, Texas, and went to the Minger Hotel, and there's a little pipe and cigar shop in there, which is kind of cool because it's in this old historic hotel, and I kind of like the whole idea of that, and bought this cheapo pipe like we all do to get started, and realized very quickly that it was crap. But it did ignite my interest in it again, and I started thinking about growing up and being around that, and so I kind of casually at first just bought a couple of pipes and started enjoying them and learning a little more about the tobacco and how important it is to smoke a good blend and in a pipe that is a good serviceable instrument. And so a few years into that, I started thinking about other things related to pipes. And I again, with growing up in a household that was a pipe and cigar household, that same household was into antiques and collectibles. I spent a lot of time as a youngster driving around with my dad in the backwoods of Texas, picking. That's a kind of a thing now you hear on television with the shows and so forth about pickers and antiques and things, and that's kind of a popular thing right now. But we were doing that when I was a kid back in the late 70s and early 80s, and we picked a lot of cool places, everything from old movie theaters to stores that had been shut down, or people's houses when they let you, or
So you've seen a lot of Americana that a lot of people now haven't seen.
Yeah, I was, it was interesting because the household I was raised in was kind of old-fashioned, and that has its good and its bad things, I suppose. One of the good things about it was that I saw a lot of things that were historical, And I'm talking about in recent history of the last 100 years, things that maybe some kids my age weren't seeing. And it was kind of opened my eyes to things that are also crafted by hand and not necessarily just fabricated like a lot of things are these days.
Yeah.
You know, that same mentality kind of bled into when I started smoking a pipe. I was out there trying to just get everything I could get my hands on to try it, tobacco-wise. And as finances improved and so forth, I started smoking a lot of different brands of pipes and thinking to myself, you know, I could do this. I could make these pipes. I could, you know, I would at least like to try to make these pipes.
Right.
At the same time, really finding an interest in the things that you see in this room. You know, from my childhood and the things of the past, the picking stuff, you know, advertising is something I've always been interested in. Not necessarily working in advertising, but the stylistic advertising of the early part of the last century all the way through the 50s. It was an interesting time in the way things were perceived and sold, and so it reflects itself in all the stuff, signage, tobacco cans. You know, gosh, you look at the art and the time that it went into to produce the tobacco cans of old compared to what you see now.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with what you see now, don't take me wrong, but gosh, it's just the old tins that were lithographed, and they were just cool, just all by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's a market now for that stuff that doesn't necessarily appeal just to tobacco smokers, but there are people out there who collect Coke signs and Pepsi signs and odds and ends cans of food and tobacco and everything else. So it's just it's a love of that of the craft and the talent that it took to produce those items.
A lot of that stuff really is works of art on some of those.
Yeah, it really is. You know, people kind of sometimes will look at it as kind of a second-hand art, but it's really actually just as important an artwork as a Van Gogh.
Sure.
Because it is who we are as a society, and people forget who we are as a society as things change and become more modern and more advanced and so forth in some ways not. It's interesting to go back and look at that cool stuff, and as much as I am a fan of technology and of new stuff, I really enjoy the old stuff too, as you can see and hear.
Sure, absolutely.
And I decided, as I got into smoking pipes, I thought, well, it would be cool to have a place to smoke a pipe. And so I have this room in my house, and I enjoy all things pipe. It drives me in so many ways into what I do in the shop when I make a pipe. As we've discussed before, it's sort of my yin and yang side of things. Whereas I have the side that I enjoy collecting things that are pipe related, advertising, art, pipes themselves, etc. That directly translates itself into my shop when I'm working on a pipe to sell or to smoke myself.
Tell us about the first time you made a pipe. The first attempt.
Well, you know, it's. I suppose my story is not any different than anybody else's. You know, you buy a pre-drilled block and you sit down and you whittle it out, and it's horrible. But you think to yourself, "Wow, this is really fun. I enjoy this." I was very fortunate to get one of these pre-drilled blocks that was just really exquisite grain, and I thought, "Man, this is just great. This wood is beautiful. It's hard as nails, but I enjoy working with it." I think I could keep doing this. I'd like to do more. So I did what like a lot of guys do, and I bought a minimal amount of tools, mostly hand tools and a Dremel, and got after it and made some pretty horrible pipes. And I decided, you know, this isn't cutting it. I'm not, you know, I do have a level at which my frustration makes me do things sometimes that isn't the smartest thing to do. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to keep doing this even as a hobby, I've got to have some better equipment and stuff. So I bought some very simple things, again, little steps, and I started drilling my own blocks, and that's where it really started clicking for me, because I had total control over what I could do with that piece of wood. It wasn't going to be a straight or a bent or whatever the pre-drill block told me it was going to be. And from the very beginning, I decided that, one of the most important things about the pipe was the stem. And when you're working with a bunch of pre-molded stems, it's just not there. Even when you're making a lot of traditional shapes like I do, to hand cut the stem and fit it to that pipe is so important on so many levels. Mm-hmm. And it just completes the piece of work that is yours and not somebody else's. So it just kind of grew from there. I suppose it's been about 6.5 years or more now of actually really seriously working with pipes on a lathe, on a metal lathe, with the tools of the trade, the real tools of the trade, and not just hacking stuff out with a saw and a Dremel. That has led me to this point where it is more than a hobby to me, and whereas it's not my total livelihood, it is a very big part of my life, and I'm also lucky to have a family that puts up with that. So it's a lot of time and a lot of dedication that sometimes
it's important to have that understanding partner. Supporting you.
Trust me, it's paramount, because without her telling me to get out there and work sometimes when I've had a bad day or whatever, it just wouldn't work at all if I didn't have that support system. And even my 7-year-old boy will sometimes tell me, hey, don't you need to work tonight, Dad? You got to finish these pipes. And that's just too cool. It's really cool. And maybe that's something he can share with me as he gets older. Who knows? The handcrafted pipe making world is something that maybe he would be interested in. We'll see.
Now, you said earlier you grew up in a household that was old-fashioned. And obviously looking around the room, I'm seeing a lot of that. Would you say a lot of your interest in pipes kind of maybe started out as a nostalgic kind of attraction?
Well, sort of. I'm kind of a 50-50 kind of guy when it comes to new and old stuff. I'm like a lot of guys, are. I enjoy the things that our world gives us now. The internet and modern filmmaking and so forth is all lots of fun, and I enjoy that stuff. But I guess I have an appreciation for the things of the past because of how I was raised. Not just because of my father, but also because of my grandparents and other people that were in my life and helping to raise me. Instilled in me this attitude that there's a lot to be learned from things of the past. And specifically, with pipes especially, because, there's an argument, I suppose, that the heyday of pipes is now because of the plentiful amount of pipe blends that we have and tobaccos, and the amount of pipe makers and quality pipe makers that we have now is unsurpassed by days of past. But on the other hand, the things that we had in the past were, in their own right, just as good. Probably one of my favorite pipe makers is Dunhill. He wasn't a pipe maker, but it was all those unnamed faces that worked at that place over the years that made Dunhill what it was. And I think about those people every time I'm making a pipe. I think about all those untold people that worked there and put their hearts and souls into that stuff. And made just a fantastic product for today. There were so many great pipe brands back in the days of the early part of last century, and even before that, when Breyer started to take a hold in the pipe world. You think about the English pipe makers especially, and the French ones. People always kind of forget about the French pipe makers, but gosh, they're so important. And even today, there's some great French pipe makers. But you think about the history there behind that, and it's one of the things that really inspires me and drives me. I love the old pipes. I love the old Dunhills, some of the old BBBs, some of the Comoys, others. Gosh, there were so many great ones.
So what is it about those in particular that just...
Elegance, class, sophistication, they were consistent. Gosh, they made great products over and over and over again. Those guys, you took a guy, for instance, on a lathe back then, and all he did was turn billiards. I'm telling you, he made a billiard like no one else. So there's a lot to be said for those guys that just were so good at what they did, even if it was just one thing. It's just something that appeals to me from a craftsman level, craftsmanship level.
Understandable, yeah. You can appreciate like you said, the blood, sweat, and tears, the soul that went into it.
You bet. And of course, Alfred Dunhill's marketing was like no other back then, and even now to a certain extent, even though they've pretty much kind of forgotten about their roots, I think, and that's unfortunate. That's a byproduct of modern stupidity towards pipes and tobacco in general, actually. But, gosh, how many people have they influenced over the years? The modern pipe makers that we have now, and there's so many good ones here in the States, overseas, all over the world. And where would they be without those companies in the beginning?
Right.
So I think there has to be a lot of gratitude towards those guys and towards everything they did. Without Alfred Dunhill's marketing, his pipes wouldn't have been what they were.